Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Good to see you all. All right. While I watch folks trickle in, I will get us started. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tiffany Goodwin Van Camp. I'm the Executive Director of American Friends of Combatants for Peace. If this is your first talk with us, Combatants for Peace is a joint Palestinian-Israeli community working in solidarity to end the occupation and bring peace, equality, and freedom to their homeland. The movement was founded almost 20 years ago by Israeli and Palestinian fighters who chose to lay down their weapons and work together for collective liberation. American Friends is the U.S. arm of the movement, and all of us here make up a diverse community working in solidarity with the CFP movement. We are grateful and excited to welcome Swiss Friends of Combatants for Peace, who is a co-sponsor today. The CFP movement is growing with friends groups forming in other parts of the world, and it is so strengthening to feel and see the solidarity of our community. Our talk today serves as a panel discussion following the virtual screening of the new documentary about Combatants for Peace, There Is Another Way, directed and produced by one of our panelists, Stephen Apkon. Thank you so much, Stephen, and the Reconsider Productions team for allowing us to share this virtual screening with our supporters. I would like to formally introduce our speakers and today's moderator. Our moderator, Hiba Qasas, is the founding executive director of the Principles for Peace Foundation, an international peace-building organization in Geneva. With over 2 decades of international experience in conflict prevention, she has held leadership roles in crisis-affected regions and at UN headquarters. Originally from the West Bank, she brings a deep commitment to addressing the complexities of conflict resolution and peace-building globally. She also convenes Uniting for a Shared Future, a new coalition formed after October 7th, working with Palestinian and Israeli leaders to challenge the status quo and promote a future of mutual recognition, security, and statehood for both peoples. Speaker Stephen Apkon is an award-winning filmmaker and social entrepreneur. Some of the films he's produced include Fantastic Fungi, Planetary, I'm Carolyn Parker, and Enlistment Days. In 2016, he directed and produced the first documentary about CFP, Disturbing the Peace, and Steve has been a pillar and dear friend of the movement since. He is also the author of The Age of the Image, Redefining Literacy in a World of Screens. Our second speaker, Suleiman Khatib, is co-founder of Combatants for Peace and a lifelong advocate for nonviolence, justice, and equality. At age 14, he was sentenced to 15 years in Israeli prison, where he studied Hebrew, history, English, and global liberation movements that inspired him to become a nonviolent activist. He is the co-founder of other groups and initiatives, including the Ripples Collective, the People's Peace Fund, and Al-Quds Association for Democracy and Dialogue. He is the co-author of In This Place Together, A Palestinian Journey to Collective Liberation, and was twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of CFP, along with his partner, Chen Alon. Chen Alon, our third speaker, is also co-founder of Combatants for Peace, as well as the head of an art and activism program at Tel Aviv University. After serving 4 years in the Israeli army and 10 years in reserves, he joined a group of reservists that publicly refused to serve in the occupied territories and was sentenced to jail as a result of it. After, he helped form CFP and has continued serving in key roles, including as the director of CFP's theater group and the producer of the annual Joint Memorial Day ceremony. Some quick housekeeping before I hand things over to Hiba. This talk will be 1 hour. It will be recorded and we will send out a copy tomorrow through email. We invite the audience to ask questions throughout the talk, and you can send your questions to Lindsay, whose profile says send questions here. And with that, Hiba, thank you so much for joining us today, being our moderator, and guiding us through this time together.
Very much, Tiffany, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, dependent on where you are. It's my pleasure to moderate this discussion today. And so I want to first start by thanking you for being with us and being here, especially after watching such a powerful and emotionally complex film. I do recall the first time I watched it, I was on a train, was not the wisest idea to watch it on a train. I got very, very emotional. The second time was the next day that I watched it, and I just saw a lot more that I haven't. I cried on different parts of the movie every time, let's say it this way. And I think the reality is that this is such a multi-layered story of courage, of hope, but it's not only a story of courage, of hope of a few individuals. It just really leaves you sitting with these raw, painful truths of two societies, Israeli and Palestinians, living through unimaginable loss, facing deep trauma, and yet in small and often invisible corners, still daring to choose empathy over enmity. And I think that's something absolutely wonderful to witness and very complex and very painful to witness at the same time. And especially in the environment that we're in since October 7th in the war in Gaza, the scale of the suffering has been devastating. Tens of thousands of people have been killed, women, children lost their lives, hostages remain in captivity today. Thousands are wounded, entire families are erased, children buried under rubble in Gaza. The movie shows and tries to shed light on all of these issues. And it gives you this sense of this entire community is gripped by fear, rage, and heartbreak. But lies behind all of this, which I would like us to try and dig deeper with our speakers today, something much harder to grasp. This emotional terrain scarred by mistrust, by humiliation, and the pull of vengeance, which now has just become so much more visible and stronger, especially when we look at societies that are being gripped with further mistrust, further divide, and majority of both societies feeling more unsafe, more hardened in their public opinion, and with such a strong desire to separate, not to cooperate, not to come together. So that the time and the terrain for peace builders has become much more difficult, and the ground below their feet are much shakier. But yet somehow this film shows us what's possible and how people can withstand through these moments of grief and find a way to communicate and to show empathy. So with this, I'd like to move to our phenomenal speakers, the heroes of this story. And first, I would like to start with Chen. And I would ask all of you, please, not only to share your views only from the political perspective or only as a peace builder, but also in your personal story, as we saw in the movie. Try and answer these questions with this multi-layered sensation you gave us in the movie in sharing so much of yourselves. So Chen, my first question to you, and then I'll come right to you, Souli, with the same question. So start thinking about it already. That in this general mood of separation that we're witnessing now and we're seeing, with the sense of loss and maximalist positions which are taking a lot more space and noise, it is in so many ways a miracle that combatants for peace movement, Israelis and Palestinians, including Gazans, have remained together and even grown since October 7th. So what made that possible? And how do you keep a joint community through such difficult times? Chen, over to you.
Thank you, Hiba. Thank you all for joining us tonight. This is another miracle, as Hiba was describing our binational community as a miracle. I agree. And all the people who haven't lost the hope yet are a miracle for me. And I'm very thankful and grateful that you all see yourself as partners, as allies of our struggle, as allies of our journey. And in order to answer your question, Hiba, I have to be honest and to say that on October 7th morning, as I say in the film, I wasn't sure that we will be able to survive. I mean, it's not obvious for me that we've survived. Now, in retrospective, along the year and a half that we are in this new journey of surviving as a binational community, as combatants for peace. As I said in the film, I have to be honest, I was surprised by the level of fury and hatred and violence that was inside me. And I was shocked because I thought I was cured. I thought that I was already fully transformed and so on. Although along the way we had few events that we went through, and I had to struggle with myself, not to lose hope, not to how to deal with the old feelings that I thought I was that are not longer mine, and I found out that I still have all the range of these feelings. And as I said in the film, it was due to the piles of body, to the images of a massacre of something that I've never experienced myself with my own eyes. Although I was witness and perpetrator of a lot of violence in my military time, in my military service, but that was a new experience for me. And as you saw in the film, the fact that I only needed the voice of Jamil, to hear in my ears the voice of Jamil, of Souli, of Rana, of others, that the first day and the second day, just to hear the tone of the empathy in their messages, and then in our talks, that awaken my belief, my vision, everything, all our binational existence. And from there on, I was ready to start our new struggle to survive or to preserve our fragile community. And I think that trust was the main new feeling that I felt. I mean, I was devastated. I was angry. I was feeling a will of revenge, and I really wanted, as I said in the film, I really wanted to do something, to act, to fight, to take weapon in my hands, and so on. And I think the trust evaporated the other feelings that I had. And I realized, Combatants for Peace is a form of knowledge for me. So I realized that the trust that I feel with Souli and Jamil and all the other brothers and sisters in Combatants for Peace allowed me to transform these feelings into an action of performing the trust, preserving the trust, and finding ways together how to fulfill our responsibility as combatants for peace and to approach our both societies.
Thank you very much, Chen. Souli, I would love to hear your thoughts about the same question, but then maybe just picking up on some of the points that Chen was talking about, and thinking about some of the statistics that we see in the period immediately after October 7th and the start in the war in Gaza, where you have two societies that are gripped by mistrust, but that reached with this level of trauma and the shock of the violence that unfolded. that level of mistrust just spiked to an unprecedented level. It really struck me when I saw some of the statistics about the fact that 89% of Israelis don't trust Palestinians, and around 93% of Palestinians don't trust Israelis. You've had a deposit of relationship and trust, and it was so complicated for you already at that moment in time. But share with us how you overcame that.
Thank you, Hiba, and thank you everybody for being with us this evening, and I guess for some people, good morning. Like Chen mentioned, so I'm trying not to repeat what Chen mentioned from my personal experience. First of all, I have to say we are a part of a bigger activist and a peace building community. For example, we are part of a network called AllMap, which is 170 joint organizations, basically. Some of them work within Arab-Jewish coexistence, within Israel proper. I'm saying this with a question mark. And some of them are like Palestinian and Israelis from the rest of the land, like from Gaza and West Bank. This is to say it's not a huge amount of people in this community, but this idea of creating like I mentioned, a binational community exists already, and there are a couple of groups working for this for so many years. Obviously, when there is like wars, we're living under occupation system anyway. It's not new, but when there are escalation, violence and wars and other challenges, of course, sometimes like these joint communities is under test. And I think actually it's very important to mention choosing this path of struggle and a joint space. Actually, it doesn't mean things will finish soon, we'll have peace agreement soon. So I know that the journey is really long and there will be a lot of challenges in our way. And that's why some people leave also as a fact. Like, I don't want to romanticize the situation. So after October 7, like the Israeli retaliation on Gaza, the war started immediately. So this doesn't actually leave any space of grieving or breathing and the fear and so on. I would say this. I knew, like, I don't know how even to explain this. I knew this is a historical moment that some people gonna leave. Let me call it like this is a divorcing moment with some relationship that we have, but there are a lot of also strengthening relationships that we have within Combatants for Peace and in the wider community that people really will choose to stick with what we advocate for years of togetherness and nonviolence and so on. I'm really proud to say, like Ken mentioned, like our movement has become stronger actually since then. The personal relationships actually has helped, I have to say, because we passed through a lot of challenges over many, many, many years. Of course, this was a massive, like a huge, and still it's a huge challenge compared to previous wars. I want to mention here, honestly, like what enabled me as a Palestinian also to stay and to lead and to advocate is really having also, like Khan mentioned, the friendships, the trust, and also like having Israelis believing non-violent solution, which means not going back to the army. For me, this was a red line. Because like this, I think captured in the movie, Steve captured this moment in the movie. It's not about us personally, but the bigger idea. It's so easy to speak about peace and love, but the real test when you are harmed. And of course, like we have to show each other empathy, and the losses were really huge, both in October 7 and afterwards, the war in Gaza until the moment that we are speaking. As I just was, I'm not so much connected here to the statistics, but like I live here, I feel the energy that around here, like almost 2 weeks now, there is no food came into Gaza or water. So we're really in a genocidal mood. at this point. Also in West Bank, where I live in Ramallah. I think many politicians and maybe women industry has found the opportunity of October 7 to use the human losses that happened October 7 in order to expand the ultra right-wing religious agenda in order to take over the rest of the West Bank. And that's unfortunately for us, I would say this. I believe the camp generally, and Combatants Police is in a leading part of that, that choose really life and stand for life, also become stronger. This is also true. I see that. And the other camp has also become stronger. And so that means for me, I have to say, the idea of binationalism and beyond the ethnic group, I think what we represent uh, is like it's a war of consciousness. Like I think there are more Palestinian and Israelis and global partners that are in the same camp more than your own ethnic group of people. And that people that choose life, and that's actually the deepest part of our message is to stand for life for everybody and for freedom for everybody. And I would say like it would need really another maybe even like researchers like to write how did we really went through the nights and the days of October 7, October 8, and so on, and previously October 6 and before that, right? We come from a lot of trauma. I feel very grounded about our ideas, despite all the challenges that happen. And I think just last point to mention for long-standing activists that really believe in a long activism for long journey, I think the inner and outer work is really important to do this. So to stay stronger within, despite the outside war machine that's happening.
Thank you, Souli. I think the point, it also struck me when I watched the movie when you were talking about it's easy to talk about peace when you're comfortable. It's much harder when you're outside of your comfort zone. And something I've observed globally in all of the countries of conflict that I worked in is this simple reality that, you know, the path to peace is always shorter from the midst of despair and chaos and pain and trauma than from the comfort of the status quo. Which brings me to you, Steve. You've been a friend of the movement for a long time, and you've been seeing how how the nonviolent movement has been evolving over the past years. Many argue that the nonviolent movement is the fringe. That's not where the broader public is today, because the broader public is engulfed into this desire for especially immediately after October 7th, there was this strong desire for revenge and support to the war. But then when emotionality started to settle down and rationality started to go up, we started to see in both societies the polling was changing in terms of the support to the war started to decline. It struck me at one point, one of the statistics, even around the support to a two-state solution, on the Palestinian side, it went up to 71%. On the Israeli side, support went down to a two-state solution, but at the same time, support to a regional political and security framework, normalizing relationship with Saudi Arabia, for example, and having a demilitarized Palestinian state was over 60%, which is interesting. So you start to see a shift from emotionality to rationality with the public, and a realization that maybe a military solution cannot be the solution and there needs to be more. So how do you see the impact on the nonviolent movement in Israel and Palestine, and what have you observed over the years? How can we move it from the fringe to the mainstream?
Well, thanks for that, Hiba, and thanks for all that you're doing as well. So I want to go back to the statistics that you mentioned at first, which was the level of trust. And it's interesting to me because the question that was posed was trust in Israelis or trust in Palestinians. And you need to think about what are the dominant narratives that are being presented in each society. And so if you're looking at a far-right government that is looking to expel 2 million people in Gaza, that is prosecuting a war that has killed 50,000 people and 13,000 children, that is expelling people in the West Bank and bringing the war from Gaza to the West Bank, it's easy to understand, and you hear the rhetoric coming out of the government, it's easy to understand why there's that lack of trust. Similarly, Israelis are being presented that Palestinians are Hamas, which we know is not the case. But you can understand where that lack of security and lack of trust is coming from. But when you go beyond the governments and the dominant narratives, you understand that, especially spending time there, that the vast, vast, vast majority of people in both societies want the same thing. And I think one of the most important things that the nonprofit, the non-violent movement can do, and what Combatants for Peace is doing, is to humanize the other and what they model and what they stand for. And so I think that, as Souli said, this is a long road, but I also believe that it is a road that so many people are waiting on the fringes to join. There are more people. They lost some people, but they also had a lot of interest. They also gained a lot of people. When you see the vibrancy of the Freedom School, and you're in the West Bank and you see so many young people learning about nonviolence and learning what it is to be together, and being mentored by people like Souli and Jamil and Namala and so many others. When you see the Israelis who just want to go and meet Palestinians, they want to see for themselves, they want to come into the West Bank now, and they're looking for places to build trust. And that's why this movement is so critically important, because they're not only modeling what it looks like to make peace, and to be together and to deal with the hard challenges, the emotional challenges, all of that. But they're also a place of refuge for those people who know that there is another way. I think it's also interesting that we're seeing these dominant narratives and the increased polarization, and in many ways that's being supported by different factions. And we have to ask the question, why? Because even people who are trying to come together, it's even more challenging. We saw at Columbia University, we had students, Palestinian, Israeli, Jewish, Arab, Christian, Muslim, internationals come together to create a screening of the film on their own, not waiting for it to be sanctioned by the university. And one of the Palestinian organizers who put that together was Mohsen Adawi, who has said that he understands that the rights of Palestinians and anti-Semitism, the fight against anti-Semitism, they go hand in hand. He understands this is about connection. This is about shared humanity, and we're working to build those bridges. And yet, is facing deportation in the United States. So the work that Combatants is doing and modeling for us around the world is critically important. And I do believe that it's interesting. I'll just end with this. The two people I met at the beginning of this journey with Combatants for Peace, probably 13 years ago, were Chen and Souli. And I asked them what this organization was really about. And in many ways, what they talked about was the basis of nonviolence. And one of them said, we're a community of people taking responsibility for our own creation. The other one said, we're breaking the cycle of violence by breaking our own sense of victimhood. And I've come to the point where I'm not sharing who said which, because it doesn't matter. But it's those two ideas that motivated the founding of Combatants for Peace and has sustained them and allowed them to grow, and to be as important as they are in this moment for all of us.
Thank you, Steve. That's beautifully said. And I'm thinking, I had the pleasure of getting to know more Combatants for Peace and in some of the convenings that we've been doing at Uniting for Shared Future. And I have to say, I found the vision very avant-garde and in terms of really both ahead of its time, incredibly courageous, and in so many ways to withstand and going against the tide is something that is fundamentally important in this time of darkness. I think the question becomes, how do we amplify the voices of reason and those leaders who are able to see beyond the darkness. And as we do that, how do we reach the persuadables, all of those who are in the middle, who are not necessarily ready to talk about peace or non-violence, but actually understand that the status quo is not sustainable? And I think one of the key things, and I'd love to hear Chen and Souli reflect on this, one of the key challenges I think that we have in this conflict is that Palestinians and Israelis have fundamentally different national and historical narrative. It's impossible to agree about the past in most cases. We often have quite a different reading also of the present, but somehow, and in my experience in the work that we've been doing at Uniting for Shared Future, which Combatants for Peace are also, big part of, is that we've managed to find that vision, that common ground around the vision for the future, vision of mutual recognition of the right of both people for self-determination, independence and statehood, safety and security, dignity, justice and equality, and healing, to recognize that both societies are living with intergenerational trauma, the reality of the Holocaust and the Nakba. And frankly, October 7th and the war in Gaza is another trauma, and in the eyes of the people in both societies. And I'm looking at the questions in the chat, and we have a question where someone is doubting the idea of a two states. And this question is, and I'm quoting, "This is a descendant of Ashkenazi Jewish Holocaust survivors with empathy for Jewish trauma, and also someone who had served an unarmed protective presence in the West Bank." But is talking about a maximalist position. So I wonder for you to reflect, both as Israelis and Palestinians who have been working across the divides, how do you bridge maximalist positions, and where do you find that common ground that continues to take you forward?
I can start. Thank you, Hiba. Like you mentioned and Steve mentioned, like we're coming from a very different narratives, right? And different realities and different background. And I think we could celebrate that actually. And also we have to recognize that. I'm one of the people like that claim like this is a partnership for future. What you Hiba doing in your organization, what we do in Combatants for Peace and the wider circle. I don't think we have to ignore the past. Actually, there are a lot of lessons to learn from the past, especially we spoke about generational trauma and the connection to the place here. For me, I studied a lot of history in jail time, and actually, I believe our people have so much in common, so than we think. I knew both languages and grew up around Jerusalem. And also, if we go back a little bit in history, I think our people has lived together for centuries. And not to romanticize the past, obviously, there's a lot of place for criticism. But what we are seeking for like living next to each other and sharing space, no matter what solution, like exactly the details, but the principles, I think it's also based in the past somehow. The past that our families still remember, the friendships and the neighborhood. Um, so I believe bringing these memories, because we are in a tense conflict moments, it's really hard to bring the let's call it like the good moments from the past. So people just really focusing on the conflicting points actually. And I don't want to minimize that. Obviously, it's there, but I think we can base our partnership for future, and that's basically means we don't need to agree actually on details of the past, who did what and who was first, and all of the details. And this is not a Palestinian-Israeli question. If I worked in other conflict zones, this is actually a global question. In every conflict zone, actually the same questions. So I think both people have like a legitimate claim to the land, and we in Combatants for Peace, and that's very important to say, we definitely recognize the power dynamic here, like, and the end goal of all of this, but it takes a long time, and I hopefully that more people will join this. And I don't think actually the majority, the mainstream, will join this kind of initiatives because, as someone said, has been research about this. Activists usually are a few percentage of the society, actually. It doesn't need like the 90 percentage, right? Um, but I think actually in many places where people thought it's impossible also, things can happen and shift can happen and the masses can change actually. And we can turn this fight for the resources to share the resources for the, it's not just the interest actually, for the moral values of all our people, for the culture. And our culture can provide really like a long historical values of roads of reconciliation, what we call sulha and other terms that can actually provide forgiveness and actually heal the wound among that exists between our peoples right now.
Thank you, Souli. Hannah, I'd love to hear from you about some of the questions that are also coming in the chat, and just adding to the question I've asked before. There's also questions about how are you looking at some of the ideas that are floated by Trump and Netanyahu about not allowing the Palestinians to return to Gaza, that they would be relocated out of Gaza. I'm just reading verbatim from the questions in the chat, so maybe you can reflect on that as well.
Yeah, first of all, before answering something about Trump and Netanyahu, which is, I think these two shameful leaders are not really, they don't worth even that we will approach their meeting, because it was so insane, everything that was done there and said there. But I want to add something about your previous question regarding, I think that the unique answer that we have on is rely in the paradigm of combatants for peace, which is kind of a paradoxical one, because we kind of gathered 20 years ago to lead a process of divorce, because we believed in two-state solution, and we thought that the solution is to break up. And along the journey, we found out that we fell in love, and as long as we deepened the journey, we felt that this is not the solution that we believe in, and it is related to your question of agreeing about the past and the present, how we read the present, how we read the past, how we codifying or the codification of the past and the present, the way we decodification of the past and the present, and how we the recodification of writing the future together. This is the process, as I see it, is read and writing the past and the present and writing the future together. So I think one of the things that I've discovered in my journey in this paradoxical departure point of Combatants for Peace is that the strongest thing that we had in common is the experience in violence. And this is the deep knowledge that we share. And I call it radical intimacy, because violence has a very unique and significant quality of knowledge. And I think that we share the same knowledge that violence is the problem and not the solution. And by doing so, we are committed to this intimacy and this process of learning that allowed us to get over the present obstacles and the challenges. And I think it's the same. I mean, that would be the same answer to this question about Netanyahu and Trump. I think this is a very narrow way of looking at the present. And I mean, I don't even think that Trump thought in advance about this solution or ethnic cleansing offer, or I mean, it's ridiculous and it's shameful to even think about displace, evacuate people from their land.
And there's some further questions that are coming in, and I will come back to them in a moment. But I'd like to come to you, Steve, one more time, and just again taking this point of how are the reactions that you are witnessing as you're doing your screening of the movie in different societies. We are in a moment of polarization where I think at different points in the movie, and I've witnessed it myself in the two in the two viewings I've joined you in, where people see different things, and you would have on one side Palestinians feeling that you're not showing enough of what's happening to Palestinians, and in the same moment you'll have Israelis saying you're not showing enough of what's happening to the Israelis. How was the overall reception, and what were some of the key dilemmas that you felt you had to encounter as you were making the movie and as you're presenting it right now?
Sure. So there's no question that people always come in to a screening with their own historical narrative, with their own feelings about it, and it can often be triggering. One of the things that we tried to deal with in the film was to say very explicitly at the beginning that it didn't start on October 7th, and we did that both visually with a montage which people saw, and then also with text. But nonetheless, that could be something that is triggering. And it's interesting because we traveled with the Palestinian-Israeli members of Combatants with the screenings, and oftentimes a question that would come for May or for Jamil as a Palestinian representative of the organization was almost a need from some people to condemn October 7th. And I think May said it most strongly, which is, of course, we're a nonviolent movement. We condemn what happened on October 7th. We also condemn October 6th and October 8th and October 9th and 10th and every day since then. And so while people come in with whatever their triggers are, they also come in, I believe, with a desire to find that place of shared humanity, to find a third perspective, a third space where they can counter each other, not in a dehumanizing way. And in that regard, the screenings and the conversations have been absolutely extraordinary. People are ready for this. People are not trusting the mainstream media and the narratives they've been presented, especially by our leaders who are fomenting separation and fear to keep us apart. The other thing that people are expressing in these screenings is that this is not just about them, that this is about us. And in fact, in making the film, that was very important to us, was the understanding that, and the world's even changed since we finished the film, right? So as we were shooting this film, the dynamics of what were going on internationally have only ramped up. With a new administration here, with everything going on with the universities, with the deportations, with the threatened expulsion of 2 million people from Gaza, et cetera, et cetera. And but we were always clear that there was a larger message here, and that is what's resonating with people. What I saw in the movement was a progression in their work. So disturbing the peace was really about how do you transcend the narratives you're born into. And as Chen said, everybody came from this place rooted in violence. And it was about the transformation to move from violence to nonviolence, from dehumanization to humanization. I would say that the way I understand the organization today, having spent more time, especially over this last year, is that the progression is an understanding that's not just transcending the narratives, but it's also this place which Suleiman likes to talk about, of collective liberation and a recognition that no one is free until we're all free. You can't help but encounter the film in the context in which you're living. And so even the ability to talk about, when Iris talks about 14 million people from the river to the sea, and that nobody is leaving, that there is only a shared future. To be able to talk about slogans which are being thrown around from the river to the sea, this notion that everyone shall be free, and it's those things that Combatants for Peace are standing for. that are so powerful and so effective. And we're realizing increasingly that, and also this is not just about Israel and Palestine. The US is as much complicit in this as anyone, both historically and over this last year. And one of the points we make in these screenings is that the U.S. has spent over $18 billion of military aid compared to $1 billion of humanitarian aid. And that $18 billion is just over this last year. In the last year of the Obama administration, we approved a $38 billion military package over 10 years. And we met with the chief procurement officer of the military, who confirmed that her job was to make sure that not $1 of that $38 billion ever left the United States. So it was full employment for our defense companies, which are sprinkled in each congressional district around the country. So when Avner in the film says we realized we had something in common, the willingness to kill people we don't know, we have to accept that as well, because it's being done every day in our name. But the journey of making the film and the journey of spending these years with Combatants for Peace is to understand that it doesn't stop at that place of the recognition of the capacity for violence. It's also the recognition of the capacity for peace, for compassion, for connection, for love. And that's what they're modeling. And that is the fullness of what it means to be a human being and humanity. And by accepting all of that and not rejecting the violent piece and projecting it on the other, they're able to do the hard work of integrating a place of peace first within themselves, and then between each other, and then modeling it for the larger community. And what we're finding is that their message is resonating with people all over the world.
Great. Steve, I think you've summed it up beautifully from your side, and I'd like to have Chen and Souli reflect in a few final words, and maybe try and answer some of the questions as they do that. One of the key questions that is coming in different ways, again in the chat, is around how do we make this go viral? How do we make this go further? How do we actually take that sense of compassion, that sense of capacity for peace to reach the masses, to affect more people in a time when we're seeing the opposite, that the public opinion is hardening, where the desire for separation is stronger, where the trauma is higher, and the desire for separation is higher than it has ever been. So how do you create more impact around the future of Israelis and Palestinians? That's the question that came in the group. How do you demand to have more voice and amplify that voice? So share with us your key takeaways. And as you're doing that, I would say maybe add as well, what do you wish people around the world understood, seeing that you're much closer to the reality on the ground, and how can they help your cause? So I'll start with you, Chen, then I'll come to you, Souli, and then we'll take it forward.
The honest answer would be that I don't know. I don't have an answer to how not to give up hope, how not to lose optimism and believe in the future. I mean, we're devastated here. That's the truth. That every day to see the images coming from Gaza, just today, and the mass killing, and the fact that so many people in Israel are supporting the ceasefire, stopping the war, bringing back the hostages. There's a vast majority of people who want to bring an end to this war, who think that this war has no results, no goals, nothing. And that's very depressing. I mean, that's very challenging for us to see that in the people's hearts, they feel and they believe and they understand what we understood many years ago, and how, for God's sake, the belief of people, even if it's not the right reason that they want to bring an end to the war, but they realize that in the end of the road, violence, and there is no military solution. That's the bottom line of everything, for both sides, by the way. And I think that what Souli said earlier about the long-term journey, and the fact that we are serving, even if we're small and weak and sometimes pathetic, we are part of the reality. We are serving as an alternative reality to all the madness around us. Anyone in Palestine, in Gaza, in West Bank, in Israel, who believe in nonviolence, in future, in peace, in justice, knows where to find us. And that's very comforting for me. And that's very, it gives me hope that even everything that we went through, the memorial ceremony is going to take place in 2 weeks, and the Nakba ceremony is going to take place in a month. And all the people who believe in this know where to find us. And that's something that I feel that it gives me, it allows me to breathe, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to breathe. And I can breathe, as Steve said, that nobody is free until everyone is free. I feel that my breathing is Souli's breathing, and we are doing this in order to breathe together. So I invite all the people here to breathe with us and not to give up hope.
Thank you, Chen. Souli, in 2 minutes, because then I'll have to wrap up and hand back to Tiffany.
As Chen mentioned, like, it's really good to breathe, actually, and that's maybe an invitation to everybody. I would say we have, like, especially for the international community, actually, is really highlighting and supporting the work of nonviolence in the land here. Centrally important, as we know from the apartheid regime in South Africa, the whole international support has helped to end the apartheid regime in South Africa. At this moment, as we live in reality, of course, the most important urgent need now actually is really to push for ceasefire and prisoners exchange at this point. In the long run, and I totally agree with Chen, we personally come from the same belief, like many, many years ago, that there is no military solution for our cause. So we want to highlight that, and really the road to to transform the system that controlling us from the river to the sea, both Palestinian and Israelis. Like, we speak about the free the oppressed and the oppressor. I know this is challenging for many people, but I think it's really important to keep an eye on reality, as we say, like one legal reality, and also not to give up on the dream of different possibilities that I believe we kind of represent also that. And it's very important that people find other options to make this change happen. And I see it actually even in numbers. I'm not a number person. We mentioned the memorial ceremony 20 years ago. When we started, we have 70 people. The next year, we have 200 people. The last couple of years, we have 15,000 people attending the ceremony, and almost 200,000 people online. So I think even in terms of numbers, the impact is happening. It takes its time, and it needs a lot of support, a lot of solidarity, a lot of patience. And again, and at the end, it's really not just for us, Palestinian and Israelis, but it's for all of us, actually, like Steve mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Souli. I think you've left us with so many food for thought, and I think points of reflection that one has to pause on and reflect. And I want to take 3 key threads and leave them with everyone who's listened to you. You both talked about the very clear fact that there is no military solution to the conflict. You both talked about the very simple fact that the status quo is not sustainable. It's not delivering security to the Israelis, nor is it delivering dignity or self-determination to the Palestinians. You both talked about the choices that are presented. that you either choose hope, you choose the future, you choose a future of dignity, of safety, of security, of self-determination, of emancipation of both people, because we're more interconnected, we're more interdependent, whether we like it or not, it's impossible, or you choose a voice of darkness. And both camps are gaining grounds at this moment in time and growing in numbers. That our collective challenge remains: how do we get those who are persuadables, those who may not today be with us, but actually have the logic to think that the status quo is not sustainable and that it's in the best interest of everybody to that we choose the future rather than we ponder on the past and trap ourselves in the ideal conditions of intergenerational war and trauma, which is where the path that the leadership of both societies is taking us on at this moment. So I thank you. It's been an honor to contribute to this discussion. Steve, keep doing what you do. It's also fantastic to amplify these voices and these messages. And to everyone who's in the audience, I also thank you. And I invite you to support Combatants for Peace, because they do deserve the support. And I'll hand with this to you, to Tiffany. Thank you very much.
Hiba, thank you for your beautiful moderation, and speakers, Steve, Souli, Chen, thank you so much for joining us today. Before everyone jumps off, I have two very important things I want to invite you to do. One is that now that you've seen this film, you are the ambassadors of this film. We need your partnership to get this movie seen around the world. Someone messaged me and said, you know, usually when they're doing groups with Israelis or with Palestinians, that neither knows there's a partner for peace on the other side. And one way that we can get this message out in a much broader way that there are partners for peace on both sides is through art and through this film. So what I invite you to do, Lindsay's going to put in the chat a link to Steve's company's website, Reconsider. You can join their email list, and also there's a tab on their website that says screen, something, it has to do with screening in the community. And you can actually invite Steve to come and the activists to come and show the film with your community, in your community. So please use those links to stay in touch with Reconsider. The second very important thing is, Steve was so kind to host this exclusive virtual screening in support of the upcoming joint Memorial Day ceremony and the joint Nakba remembrance ceremony. So all of your donations are going to go toward both of those ceremonies. And as you can hear, these are both ceremonies that ground all of us in hope. They're an opportunity to anchor ourselves, to reaffirm our commitment to each other. They're a spiritual gift to over 300,000 people who attend this around the world. So we invite you all to join us for the upcoming ceremony on the first ceremony, April 29th. That's the memorial. The joint Nakba is May the 15th. And I do want to share, these ceremonies do cost a lot to put on. You will see if you haven't seen them yet. They're a huge production. CFP has a campaign going on right now to fund the ceremonies, and they're at 70% of their goal. So we need to raise 30% more to help ensure the ceremonies happen. And Lindsay will share a link to the crowdfunding campaign where you can see where they're at and where they need to be. And we ask you to share that link with other people. Little gifts, that's all it takes. Collective little gifts, pooling our shared resources. And that is all for now. We'll send you a follow-up email with various links, including to Steve's website, Reconsider website, and the film website. And thank you all again so much for participating. We look forward to seeing you soon on April the 29th.